Spanish football was rocked at the start of 2021 by reports in El Mundo detailing FC Barcelona's financial crisis. The fact that Barcelona are in a lot of debt and that the pandemic has arrived at a rather inopportune moment for the club was common knowledge, but the extent of Barcelona's financial problems and the immediacy of them came as something of a shock. What is particularly extraordinary about Barcelona's plight is the speed with which it has occurred. Both on and off the pitch, Barcelona's decline over a short period of time is almost unfathomable. If we rewind back to the 2014-15 season, Barcelona won the treble, securing the La Liga title with 94 points, beating Juventus in the Champions League final, and seeing off Athletic Bilbao in the final of the Copa del Rey. It was only the second continental treble in the history of the Spanish game, the other also having come from Barca under Pep Guardiola in 2008-09. In Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez and Neymar, many felt Barcelona had the greatest attacking trio in the entire history of the sport. Between them, they scored 122 goals in all competitions that season. Barca looked unstoppable. It was also an excellent year for Barcelona from a financial point of view, though 2015-16 would be even better. By the end of the 2015-16 season, Barcelona were generating the most revenue of any football team on the planet, they enjoyed healthy 12% growth, and they managed to slash their debt by 160 million euros, down from 328 million euros in 2015 to 271.4 million euros in 2016, as part of a long-term strategic plan to reduce their debt. Fast forward back to the present day and El Mundo's recent revelations, and it is claimed that Barcelona are now in 1.37 billion euros of debt. Their revenue fell 14% in 2020, and much of that debt is owed to the banks, and is due to be repaid at the end of this season. What's more, it's not as though Barcelona have spent the earth to finance an increasingly dominant team. They haven't won the Champions League since 2015, they missed out on the La Liga title to Real Madrid last season, they were humiliated by Bayern Munich in the Champions League, and it looks as though they could be similarly easily dumped out at the hands of PSG in UEFA's biggest competition this season. Perhaps the most telling statistic is that Barcelona's debt-to-earnings ratio has gone from 1.94 in 2016 to 3.64 in 2020. And that latter figure is an extremely generous one based on increasingly dubious accounting methods implemented by the club under recently arrested former president Josep Bartomeu. Barcelona's financial situation is so dire that one or two publications, including El Mundo in their initial revelations, even flirted with the idea of bankruptcy. A bizarre thought for the most valuable football club on the planet. If you're like most people, you've probably heard snippets of information about Barcelona's troubles, along with that B word being thrown around, but without any real substantive context to go along with it. Over the last 6 or 7 months, I've made a couple of in-depth videos about Barcelona, covering Ronald Koeman's appointment and Josep Bartomeu's disastrous presidency. But I've also been saying for a while that I'd like to take a deep dive into their finances for you all, so today, that's exactly what I'm going to do. The acceleration of Barcelona's debt since 2016 has really taken place over the course of just a few years. From 2017 to 2020, Barcelona's debt trebled, in a drastic reversal and dereliction of the club's original long-term strategic plan. There are a number of reasons why this is the case, and why it has been allowed to be the case, and we'll start with the latter. For a start, Barcelona have been allowed to borrow such enormous amounts of money because the club generates such enormous revenue. This is pretty straightforward. In much the same way as someone with a large salary can get a bigger mortgage than someone with a small salary, big businesses, of which big football clubs are part, can borrow ever-increasing amounts of money from ever-expanding sources as their revenue grows. And, up until 2020, Barcelona's revenue had been growing consistently. Back in 2015, when Barca generated 608 million euros in revenue, the club laid out what it called their 2015 to 2021 strategic plan. The plan outlined 5 pillars: sporting excellence, social implication, patrimony, global and brand positioning, and financial management and sustainability, with targets in all 5 sectors. The most eye-catching, and the most widely reported, was the target of achieving 1 billion euros in revenue by 2020-21, a target which would require Barcelona to grow their income 13% annually over the next 6 years, which they were on target to achieve before the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic. You see, Barcelona make more money than any other club on the planet. There are three key revenue streams at all football clubs: commercial, matchday, and TV. Barcelona top all three, with the exception of TV revenue in 2018-19, when Liverpool generated €1 million more than them in this respect alone. Overall, Barca generated €841 million in revenue in 2018-19. Their closest rivals were their biggest rivals on a sporting front, Real Madrid, who generated €757 million, followed by Manchester United on €712 million, Bayern Munich with €660 million, and so on and so forth. To put Barca's financial supremacy into some context, the club's commercial revenue alone is more than Atletico Madrid, Inter Milan, or Borussia Dortmund's total revenue. It is gargantuan. So Barcelona have been able to borrow money to their heart's content, with lenders confident that they generate enough money to pay them back and to sustain large amounts of debt. There are a number of businesses which operate in this way. The only problem with Barcelona's business model, aside from the sheer insanity of some of the individual deals that they have done, which I'll come to later on, is that any loss of revenue or failure to meet your projected earnings has the potential to be catastrophic. And then came COVID-19. Basically, someone in Wuhan province ate a dodgy bat or a pangolin or something, and now Barcelona are going bust. Alright, there might be a bit more to it than that, and as you can probably suss out, I don't have any degrees in ecology, biology, microbiology, virology. To be quite honest with you, I never went to university at all, but to cut a long story short, whoever did what with what animal in Wuhan, the pandemic saw Barcelona's revenue fall by €135 million from 2018-19 to 2019-20. Though, of course, Barcelona budget for growth, not stagnation, and they estimate that the true cost of the pandemic to the club has been in excess of €200 million, and that without it, they would have achieved their €1 billion plus projection. That loss of income, the club claims, was the difference between a €2 million profit for the period and a €128 million pre-tax loss, which is the financial performance they actually posted. You might be wondering how Barcelona are able to lose so much money when they make so much revenue. And again, there are a couple of reasons why this is the case. A big one is their wage bill, which is the largest not only in world football, but actually in all of world sport. Barcelona's wage bill stood at over €500 million for 2019-20, making it the only €500 million plus wage bill on the planet. Their wage bill is €125 million higher than the next highest wage bill in world football at Manchester United. And for added context, only €53 million separates Manchester United in second and Chelsea in ninth on that front, giving you some indication of how unique Barcelona's wage expenditure is at this moment in time. I made a recent video showing 7 clubs across Europe with total wage bills that are less than Barcelona pay Lionel Messi alone, which included AC Milan. But it's not just Messi, who is on astronomical money. According to reports, the club is paying Samuel Umtiti €230,000 a week, Frankie de Jong €400,000 a week, and Antoine Griezmann almost €900,000 a week. Regardless of what you think of those players, those are eye-watering sums, and they would be unlikely to be offered them at any other club on earth. However, whilst much is made of Barca's wage budget, it only actually accounts for 61% of their revenue, which is roughly equivalent to Manchester City, Paris Saint-Germain, and Liverpool's wage distribution, due to Barca's extraordinary revenue potential, so that alone is not enough to cause their financial distress, though it is a factor. Then there's Barca's transfer business. In recent years, no team has spent more on players than FC Barcelona. They spent well over €100 million this season, over €250 million last season, over €130 million the season before that, and more than €350 million in the 2017-18 campaign alone. In terms of transfer expenditure during that time, the club is in a league of their own, with the likes of Ousmane Dembele, Philippe Coutinho, and Antoine Griezmann all ranking among the most expensive signings of all time. As you probably know, transfer fees in football aren't paid up front, but are spread over a number of years, so Barcelona is still paying for all of these players now. As of the 2019-20 accounts, Barcelona owe a whopping €323 million on transfer debt for players who they either already own or, in some cases, have already sold. Again, on this front, they are out way in a league of their own, with the highest transfer debt of any team on earth. What's more, if you rewind back to 2017, the club only had €64 million in transfer debt, a manageable figure which positioned them comfortably in line or even in healthier shape than many of their peers. So Barcelona have an enormous wage bill. They've spent a fortune on players, and they still owe more than €300 million for those players, financed largely by debt, which is accruing interest, and they're also in the process of completing an €850 million redevelopment of their facilities, primarily the Camp Nou. This process involves expanding the stadium's capacity from 99,354 up to 105,000, putting a roof on the stadium, and completely replacing the Palau Blaugrana, the club's indoor training arena, which hosts a number of other sports, most notably Barca's popular basketball team. The redevelopment plans also involve building a new stadium for Barca's B and youth teams, the Estadio Johan Cruyff, the cheapest of the projects at just €12 million, and the only one to have yet been completed. Having looked at Barcelona's finances, some have begged the question as to whether these redevelopments, which all come under the S by Barca plans laid out back in that 2015 to 2021 strategic plan, couldn't be delayed until the club's balance sheet looks a little healthier. But the reality is that these works are not solely, and even not primarily, aesthetic. The Camp Nou is over 60 years old, and the last major renovation took place in 1995. Interim president Carlos Tusquets, himself an economist, put it bluntly when he said, "The stadium is literally falling down," expressing fears that the crumbling old ground could lead to serious injuries. The project cannot really be postponed, even if Barcelona can't afford it. The most pressing issue for Barcelona is the scale of their short-term debt. The club owes €730 million over the next 12 months, including €266 million owed to the banks, which must be repaid by June 30th of this year. That is an extraordinary amount of money to be owed in such a short amount of time by a business that is hemorrhaging cash, with Europe still very much in the grips of the COVID-19 pandemic. When businesses can't finance their debts, bad things happen, and that's why talk of bankruptcy and insolvency has been mooted. Right now, the idea of Barcelona generating €266 million to pay the banks by June and €730 million for various other debtors, including a number of other clubs who they owe money for players, seems to be one for the birds. The club's own forecasts, which were already worrying, had banked on fans being allowed back into the Camp Nou by now and capacity crowds by the end of the season. Clearly, neither of those things are going to happen. So are Barcelona going to the wall, like Rangers, Palermo, or Bury? Well, if they were any of those other clubs in their current predicament, the answer would be a resounding yes. The reality is that they aren't, though. They are FC Barcelona, the most valuable football club in the world. That's not to say that they aren't in big trouble, they most assuredly are, and wholesale sweeping changes will have to take place over the next few years in order to ensure confidence in the club's financial operations. But they are almost too big to fail. The club's ability to generate cash gives them leeway that few other clubs would ever be afforded. They will almost certainly have to find a novel way of restructuring their debt, extending the period of time over which it is repayable, and then they will have to focus their efforts on paying it down once COVID has largely subsided and the club is generating enormous amounts of income once again. It is difficult to see Barcelona completing deals for the likes of Haaland or Mbappe anytime soon. There will have to be a period of austerity at the club and a move towards a more sustainable business model, which isn't unrealistic, for a club capable of generating €1 billion in revenue and still able to bring through immense talent from their academy. In many respects, Barcelona are at a fascinating crossroad. On the one hand, they are mired in debt, the club is rife with scandal and controversy from top down, they are a shadow of the team that they used to be, they look nowhere near capable of winning the Champions League, the La Liga title will be a huge challenge yet again, key players like Piqué, Busquets and Messi are all aging, and it's still rumoured that Messi could leave the club for nothing at the end of the season. Yeah, that doesn't sound too great, does it? On the flip side, however, their form has actually improved greatly in the league. They just mounted an inspired Copa del Rey semi-final comeback against Sevilla. They have some absolutely superb young players in the forms of Ansu Fati, Frenkie de Jong, Pedri, etc. There look to be even more great players coming through. They still have the best player on the planet for now, and Bartomeu is at least gone now. If you were to ask me where Barcelona will be in 5 or 10 years, in relation to Europe's elite, I wouldn't be able to offer up any confident predictions. Clearly, they are going through a transition period, but it's not at all clear how they will navigate this period and whether they will reach the type of final destination that will lead to another world-class side and a hatful of trophies as they have become accustomed to over the last 15 years. Key to all of these factors is the club's presidential elections, which should really have already taken place. Postponed due to COVID, the new date is yet to be confirmed, but the candidates have already been narrowed down from 9 to the final 3. Interim President Carlos Tusquets didn't run, meaning the 3 candidates are Joan Laporta, Victor Font, and Toni Freixa. Laporta is seeking re-election, having previously served as Barca president from 2003 to 2010. Though he hasn't been involved with the club in any official capacity for more than a decade, Laporta has never really gone away. Popular with supporters due to the success of the club during his reign, Laporta was a vocal and scathing critic of Josep Bartomeu's reign, and he has been positioning himself for a bid to retake the presidency for many years. A career politician, Laporta talks a good game, he knows how to run a campaign, and he is undoubtedly the frontrunner. One thing he has almost never addressed though, since the election campaign began, is how he actually intends to address the club's perilous financial predicament. Politicians like good news, not bad news, and Laporta is running a campaign on taking Barca back to their period of success under him and Pep Guardiola, rather than talking about an era of austerity. It remains unclear whether this is a political ploy to gain election, or whether he is actually deluded about the extent to which the club is in the red. Victor Font has sought to capitalise on this omission from Laporta's rhetoric, speaking candidly and repeatedly about the need for fiscal responsibility and how he would build Barca back up from the ground with a focus on youth development and creating a clear pathway for La Masia's most gifted graduates to step up into the first team. His campaign is centred around the promise to sack Ronald Koeman and bring Xavi Hernandez back to the club as manager, an idea that is popular with a large section of the club's fanbase. Despite that fact, Laporta is still very much the frontrunner, with polling suggesting that he has a fairly sizable lead. The third candidate, Toni Freixa, would like to bring Xavi back to the club, but initially as B-team boss, rather like Pep Guardiola's pathway to the top job, though whether Xavi would be too set on that idea himself remains to be seen. Few give Freixa a shot at winning the election, wherever they are held. Behind the scenes, there are further problems at Barcelona. In light of the club's financial plight, players agreed to a combined €122 million wage cut. That's a cut which is larger than the total wage bill of all but 3 La Liga teams right there, in addition to accepting a €55 million wage deferral, postponing wages owed this season to be spread over the next 3 years. Despite those rather generous measures, you could say from the players' perspective, they are reportedly still yet to be paid. Barcelona pay their players on a bi-annual basis, both their salary and any performance-related bonuses. Once in January, in the middle of the season, and once in July, right at the end of the campaign. In February, it was confirmed that players hadn't yet received their January payment, and there are reports suggesting that that remains the case. The club's wage bill ought to have been further decreased since last season due to the sales of Nelson Semedo, Arturo Vidal, and most notably, of course, Luis Suarez. But even in light of all these cuts, deferrals and sales, the club is still seemingly unable to meet their obligations. This doesn't bode well for a business with €266 million owed to the banks in just 3 months' time. An argument I've often heard made is that Barcelona ought to have just sold Lionel Messi at the end of last season. The Argentine wanted to leave, but refused to take the club to court in order to do so, but the club were unwilling to let go of him for any price, despite the fact that he only had 12 months left on his deal. Barca likely could have sold Messi for somewhere in the region of €100 to €150 million, in addition to slashing something like €130 million from their wage bill. On the face of it, it makes sense. In reality, and somewhat counterintuitively, selling Messi could potentially have done more damage than good to the club's finances. The simple fact is that Barca's high revenue is the reason they are likely to be able to find a way out of this mess, and the reason they are the most valuable and commercially successful club on the planet is because of their diminutive number 10. Without him, you wipe out a huge chunk of Barca's revenue, you signal that the club is on the decline, and you potentially make it far more difficult to restructure that debt going forward. You also give up any hope of returning to the summit of the Spanish game, and without Messi, it's possible that Barca could miss out not just on the title, but on Champions League qualification altogether. So whilst there are arguments both ways, and the real danger is that the club now loses Messi for nothing, selling the Argentine would not have been a one-stop shop to fix all of Barcelona's problems, and it might even have done more damage than good. So, will Barcelona go bankrupt? No, or not yet at least, but the next few years are going to be pivotal to the future of the club. If they get things right, they can maintain their huge cash flows, start to repay that debt, and transition into a new era built around the likes of Pedri, Fati, and De Jong. Get things wrong, their financial situation could deteriorate even further, their revenue will be devastated by an inability to compete for the big trophies, and potentially either Messi's departure or eventual retirement, and they could end up in a position where they still have enormous debts, but no longer have the commercial revenue engine room behind them to back it up, or to navigate their way out of any future financial mess. So that is it for today's video, but thank you all as ever for watching. Give us a like if you enjoyed it, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on either Twitter or Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens should you wish to do so.